Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. June is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Awareness Month. 12 million people in the United States are living with PTSD. Most people don't get the help that they need. And a lot of times we think about these months, the last month was Mental Health Awareness Month. Remembering is the key. Remembering who our neighbor is, those who may be struggling. And to join me today is a new guest, Laura Martin. Thank you so much for joining us to share your insight and just be part of the discussion.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for doing this. It's big because it is something a lot of people try and hide from and don't really talk about. So
I appreciate you saying that. A lot of times I've been in support groups where the measuring stick is how bad their lives are. And unfortunately, it doesn't go anywhere when we're kind of measuring that. Anything anyone's going through and is justified. If you are struggling, I do encourage you to get help. A disclaimer: if you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. 988 right now in the States is the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, but wherever you are, whatever part of the world, I do encourage you to find what is there available. I don't like reinventing the wheel. Being in the mental health field myself, find out what works, be connected, the hardest 3 words to say is, I need help. So I always say people say it better than me, Laura. So this is an unknown person, but I thought this quote really captures what I was feeling when I was thinking about this month. It isn't about it isn't about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
I mean, it's like that book, Oprah and, I don't remember the doctor that she co-wrote it with, but it's not what happened to you. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you. And it kind of stems from there and the research behind it, because all of our personalities and the things that we try and hide away from, they're all built up because of the stories or the experiences or the things that have happened to us. When we can have that compassionate view on it, I think it sets us wrong from feeling, at least I see this with my clients, feeling too broken or feeling like something is unfixable in all of these elements. And it's just a part of you that didn't get the love and didn't get the attention that it needed to at the time. And therefore you built up defense mechanisms. So it's not ever what's wrong. It's just what happened and how can we start to work from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And a lot of times I try to tell my people at work, my clients, individualize what you're going through. There's a lot of cultural context. So, and sometimes we're like, well, if we generalize our situation, sometimes it doesn't feel very conducive. Like, I'm half Korean, so part of culturally, there's a lot of pressures, a lot of little things that other cultures wouldn't really understand. So, a person, older son in the Korean household, there's a lot of pressure to do well. But what if everyone, other siblings are not doing well? The pressure is heavier. We sometimes like to pathologize what is wrong, but really we got to understand with the individual, it is, and I try to empower those who I work with, that don't listen to your neighbor. Don't listen to. It worked for me. It may, these little things may be helpful, but always trying to personalize. Why is it important to you? And when it comes to these kind of things, is there anything you want to add? I know, like, trauma is so vast, and then like we could talk about in all different directions, but I love having different guests to kind of share their kind of side of it. So could you share a little bit of what maybe we haven't touched or we just started talking about? Anything you want to address?
Yeah, I think you've touched on so many good points. I see this a lot with my clients as well, where it's like someone heals faster than them, or they feel this shyness around their trauma. Because it's like, for me, like I've experienced a lot. I talk about the trauma that I've had and things of that nature. And it's like, oh, but I haven't had that much happen. And so then they feel like it's not big enough to look at. And you can have trauma from anything, because trauma isn't the event. Trauma is what happened to your body in response to an event.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what happens. Our body freezes around something. So I work in somatic therapy, right? So I work with how the body reacts, because that's what trauma is. A lot of us think it has to do with the event in and of itself, or war victims, rape, assault, things of that nature. That's kind of the stem that we keep it in, when in reality, it could be a heartbreak. It could be food poisoning. You were little and you almost got hit by a car and now you're afraid to cross the street because your body got frozen around that emotion. Like, there are things that we don't even remember that come to trauma, and they built up our personality traits. They built up our protection mechanisms. They built up our habits, our beliefs. Like, that's what trauma is. It's, something I say a lot in my programs or in my coaching, where it's like, to give it a little bit of context, a lot of us, we say it where it's like, I don't like that person's personality. I don't like this, da 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 da. What you're really saying is you don't like how that person learned to survive, because their personality and what science or what society calls self-sabotage, science actually calls self-protection. Like, that's what trauma is. And that's how you start to look at it through a lens of something being wrong, and just a little bit more compassion, a little bit understanding that, it's multifaceted. There's so many different things of it. And so if you're looking for any part that is within you where it's like, I don't want to keep this anymore. I don't like this tendency. I don't like how I react in this way. I don't like how I speak. I don't like my relationship to food. I don't like, certain things. It's like, okay, then that's where we have to look at, where is your protectors from your trauma keeping you safe in this, because that's all it's doing. And then you can start to unravel from there.
I was thinking when you were mentioning, I'm I'm a faith leader, and a lot of times what I see, a lot of times in churches, not to get everyone, I know it's different for everyone, but when you're a church leader, you start seeing things interesting, because someone's family member may beat cancer. At the same time, someone in the same congregation lost someone from cancer a week before. It gets very complicated. So, because someone's good news is someone's bad news. You mentioned, I love what you mentioned, how, we look at, these big events, like maybe someone who's been assaulted, or someone who was in wartime, was a combat vet, but, I even think about, people, relationships breaking up. That's a loss. It's funny, we don't think about it as a loss. We're like, there's always this, you'll find a better one. There's always this implementation that's so general and useless to the individual at that time. And I feel the ability that we have to have, like, the worst story to justify having any help when it comes to trauma is part of the problem when we talk about trauma. But in hindsight, I'm a veteran myself. I wasn't a combat vet, but I was a veteran myself. I served during the 9/11 when we back in 2001. But I remember, there's something very honest. There's a quote from this guy, Jake Wood. He was a veteran himself in Afghanistan. He says, "I feel no emotional connection to these outward human gestures. I am not there because I never left Afghanistan." And I for me, my family was in the military. Even you don't have to. You could read these words, and I kind of understand in the sense of being stuck. I could be in a room with several people. They could want to help me. If I don't see it like they're helping me, or if I'm just elsewhere, it doesn't matter. So, well, when you hear this quote, what comes to mind?
I mean, that's PTSD.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's, and it's more like I had that when I was leaving domestic violence, trying to be in relationship. And so it doesn't have to be war. It honestly doesn't even have to be domestic violence. Like it's any built up protector. Like we spoke about relationships earlier. That's what I do. I'm a trauma and relationship specialist. So I see people that are trying to find love, and I see people that are trying to move forward, but they have the pains of their past keeping them trapped in these tendencies. So you're relating to the person that's in front of you, and you're trying to fall in love with the person that's in front of you, but you're speaking to them from past relationships. You're speaking in the moment as if the past is in the present. And this is where our brains can get tripped on that, because that's the way they work. Your amygdala is constantly going to be trying to protect you, and your RAS system and things like this. And so when I'm reading this, it's like, yes, that's a more elevated state, but to bring it back into commonality context, it doesn't have to be war and PTSD what we think. It can just be, you're in this present moment. You are listening to this live. You are listening to this podcast. You're here right now. But at the same time, if I start talking about relationship and I start talking about something, it's going to start jogging your memory, and it's going to bring that forward, and it gets really hard. This is why, if you ever look at it, it's like you have the same argument with different partners about the same thing. We all have done it. We've all been, and you're like, oh, it's not like you're just repeating these cycles. That's what our body does. It's constantly keeping us safe. And so if we haven't worked on our trauma and we haven't worked on these parts to actually release them, our body's going to constantly protect us. And so it's working with that kind of lens where it's like your nervous system and your subconscious programming that's keeping you, like he said, I never left Afghanistan. That's not something that you can just do by bringing him back to America and saying, just be happy. You survived. You're good. What's wrong? Like that doesn't work. And like also only cognitive therapy, like that doesn't necessarily work either. You have to get the body into a regulated state to feel safe, to actually get them to release what is keeping them in the past and triggering these things. And this is why you see loud sounds triggering people. This is why you see when a partner says something the way that your mother did, and all of a sudden you're responding like a 7-year-old. Like there are different things that happen. And this is why we have to get into the subconscious reprogramming, so that, we're not just not playing victim to life, but we're just like reacting to life and saying, oh, well, that happened, so I get to act this way. And it's like, no, you actually can choose a different path. It's going to take work, because you have to go and feel those very uncomfortable feelings that we've been trying to avoid for a very long time. But when you do that, you actually set yourself free to build more resiliency for the future.
And this quote, I think it gives a good illustration, but like you said, it doesn't mean it could be a relationship. I feel no emotional connection to outward human gestures, but I'm still at when I lost so-and-so, whatever, you could fill in the blank. And I just felt the structure of this quote really kind of is honest, a lot of time, and I feel when it comes to, think about, obviously this coming back, and he's doing human gestures in the quote. What makes me wonder is a lot of people looking at people and they're like, oh, not only they give you advice, but they're looking at the lenses, what they think would help them, which kind of is very problematic. A lot of times, for instance, housing is an issue. Obviously, in the mental health field, there's always housing. And I find it funny because, family members, you need to get your own place. Independence. As person, what's better for you? What is better for you? Now, and sometimes it's not getting another place right away. Not yet. It may be just figuring out other things, because if they hate themselves, if they're just struggling right now, why would they want to be somewhere else struggling and hating themselves there? So I feel sometimes we look at the lens of what would help me, being a family member or someone who's around someone who's struggling, like, oh, if they have their own place, if they're in a relationship, if they're not alone, they'll be happier. It kind of skips all the steps that you were talking about, skips all all that addressing things that will continue to repeat, because it's response. We respond to at that moment. We respond to protect ourselves. Obviously, more about this I do, but I see a lot. I see a lot of times when someone is trying to make a change. I always kind of ask them, what do you want to do? What would be better? Well, if I get this job, if I get this house, if I get this, but how about you? And sometimes the urgency and the rush kind of skips over a lot of things, and kind of trauma gets pushed to the side, because right now I'm too busy for trauma. I'm too busy for that right now. So I want to ask you, when you think of trauma, what have you experienced that seemed to help those suffering? I know you mentioned a little bit. You want to elaborate a little bit more as we kind of move forward?
Yeah. So what I work in is somatics. So that is connecting the body to the mind, because trauma is stored in the body. It's not something that, and I'm not saying cognitive therapy doesn't help. It's very good, but becoming aware is just, it's just nice. And then also it's very annoying, because now you're aware you have trauma and it's still there and it's trapped. And you're like, I'm so annoyed. Why do I keep doing these things? Because your body hasn't actually released it. And so this is where I see a huge shift happening post the COVID and everything like that, where people have become so hyper aware of all the things because we had so much time. And now everyone wants to pathologize and put everything in place, and we're finger pointing and we're blaming and we're doing the things, and nothing's actually getting fixed, because that's distracting ourselves from actually sitting with the rejection wounds, the abandonment wounds, the betrayal wounds, the fears, the neglect, the feelings. And we try to think if we think our way out of it, or put enough affirmations around our house about it, that it'll be healed. And so my biggest thing for helping people understand this is that it doesn't have to consume your life. It doesn't have to be this thing that you spend all days of all nights, and now you have to feel these hard emotions, and you're sitting in the shadow and you're crying in a corner and you're doing these things. Like, that's not the vibe. It can be something you enjoy, but it does have to get out of your body. And in order for that to happen, so many of us, I work with high achievers, and we can speak to men, we can speak to high achievers. We live a lot in our brains. Like, we just want to study things, or we want to think our way out of stuff. Like, we're good if we stay here. And getting in the body, it's like foreign. It's like, I don't know what my heartbeat even feels like. I breathe up to here. I don't even know how to breathe to my belly. I don't know what my body feels like. I've even had, partners I've been dating, they're like, I don't even know what anger feels like in my body. And I was like, that's a problem. Like, what do you mean this doesn't? And I'm like, there's just so many things. And this is the common in our society nowadays. And so trauma is thrown around in this pop culture world right now. You see it all over the internet, all over TikTok, all over everything. But it's more of getting into your body and actually healing it, which is the scary thing for a lot of people. And they just want to point the finger and diagnose things without actually giving a solution. And I see it as a huge problem post-pandemic, because we need solutions, not just more diagnosis and finger pointing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when it comes to I feel that, like you said, the awareness, the understanding part, just part of it. There's seasons of recovery. Like, when someone stops using substances, that's first step. But after that, you start filling in the things that you were spending all the time using those substances. So I feel, we're in a constant movement, whether you like it or not. I used to joke with my clients sometimes. They're like, change is inevitable. So they're like, well, we're all kind of unfinished, if you really think about it. Right now, as we speak right now, I'm unfinished. So are you, Laura. We're just always this flux. And if things were static, like bridges should be static to keep them up. But if things were static, that means the team that won the Super Bowl will always win the Super Bowl for permanence, for all time. And they're like, no way. Like, then, as much as you may dislike change, it also is necessary. Sometimes, you could probably, the whole reframing, the understanding is the first step. But what happens after that? Because I think what I've seen, though, is that we get a lot of solutions, especially post-pandemic. Not solutions, a lot of self-aware, self-diagnosing. Just because I'm sad today doesn't mean I have depression. Just because all this stuff. And I heard this one speaker, and I thought it was really interesting how we treat mental health and everything versus medical. We don't start to try to get better so we don't get diabetes when we have diabetes. We don't try. We don't say, okay, we're fine, do whatever you want until it actually all falls. When things get crisis. But that's how we handle mental health. It's always we'll wait until the diagnosis. So, with that being said, I want to pause a moment because I like to give my guests, a new guest, a time to share. Why do you do what you do? What brought you to this this area field? If you want to share, obviously, anything you're comfortable with, so those who are listening get to know you a little bit more. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's always one of those things where it's like there's so much, and then you don't know where to start. You're like, I don't know. I have had the experience of experiencing a lot of trauma, from sexual assault to domestic violence to losing my mother to addiction to battling my own addictions to eating disorders to chronic illness. Things God put in my path so I could do the work that I do now. And at the time, had I believed that? Absolutely not. I was a victim, and I was suicidal, and I didn't see a way out. And there was this moment at 24 where my knees were on the floor, and I was contemplating taking my life. And it was just, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I don't know. And your story might not be as vast or anything like that, but we've had those moments where it's like, I can't do this. And I realized, I was like, it's not that I want to die. It's just, I cannot do this anymore. And it was just this will of something inside of me. There has to be a reason. And I built my first company off of that. And that was a gut brain connection company, IBS, all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't until these last 2 years that I realized my biggest thing has always been to heal generational trauma. And that's my biggest movement, where the people in my world, they're not modeled healthy relationships. I was never modeled a healthy relationship, and no one in my family is happily married. No one, everyone has different partners. Everyone's been divorced, all this stuff. And I didn't see this model of success that I deeply felt was what I wanted. And so that's just kind of been my mission ever since, of how can you strip away all the things and all your survival mechanisms so that you can actually become the beacon of light that you were as a child, and without the stories that you had. And so I had to strip away all these things, because at the end of the day, all the things that happened to me, it was a mirror. And not to say they were ever my fault, but it was my responsibility that I kept putting myself in situations and I wasn't getting help. I wasn't doing the things that are plentiful available, a lot of them free. I wasn't doing that because I was stuck in this orbit of this world of self-pitying and not wanting to deal with my pain and not wanting to do anything, and not even my mother was an addict. I didn't know another way. And so I've just started to share and create and do these things where it's start the podcast and do these things, and it just kind of share what I know and what I was learning. And I always make the joke that I'm an accidental entrepreneur, because that wasn't ever the plan. I have notes where I didn't think I'd make it past 25. And, it was me and my sister went to Paris for my 30th birthday, because we're whoa, we didn't think we'd make it here. This whole thing. And it's you never know. But if you actually start to look at life through this lens where everything is a game, and everything is a value add, and everything is putting you in the path, and God doesn't make mistakes, and really aligning with that, somewhere there's going to be something, somewhere, instead of looking at oh, but I have all of this work to do, and creating all these gaps and creating all these things, which gets in our way. I don't know. I didn't think this would be my life at all, but here we are.
Yes. I just, when I was thinking about, when I wanted to get involved, I just emailed a lot of people in my state. I'm like, hey, how can I get involved? Before Revive Ministries, I'm like, I was part of the church. I just remember myself just an idea. I'm like, one thing was the platform was, there's a lot of things people don't talk about. they shoo under the rug. I've experienced mental health. I've experienced, you know, I experienced a lot coming out of the military, loss, people who died from suicides, different story, things that I wasn't able to wrap my head around, cultural barriers. But, one thing I did, I, I read a book, I use it a lot, Viktor Frankl. I kind of mold the idea that I only focus on what I could change. What can I control today? And there were moments, not to get too much into it, that's all I did. A lot of things I was not happy where I was, but I remember doing before the podcast, I actually had at my church people come and speak about their stories of what recovery or whatnot. And I remember before, this kind of funny, before COVID, 2019 is when I started the podcast. In the fall, and then I won't have time, and it's something that I wouldn't imagine, because working in the mental health field now, I would say I'll be super busy. I won't have time for a podcast, but I'm doing more podcasts than I did before. It's funny how time works. So I want to impress to you that I'm inspired when I see other people do the same. I used to say, my recovery is, my serving is my healing, recovery, that kind of idea. So it has helped. Obviously there's seasons of growth and healing, and now I'm married and all this stuff. It's nice. Is a lot of times you're like, well, you can't, you look back and you're like, well, yeah, that's where I was. But then at the same time, you encourage even more to do more, and then at the same time, that changes too. I want to ask you real quick, you have, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Healing to Happy, is that correct? Healing to Happy. I'm gonna put the ticker under here. HealingToHappy.com. It's I was looking at your profile, and so tell us a little bit about that.
So Healing to Happy is my little baby. I do consulting, I do programs, I have memberships for anyone that is looking for the real tools for having healthy and thriving relationships. And I feel like a lot, at least in my world, there's a lot of fluff out there right now where it's like manifestation and like all these kind of things, which is great. I'm into that, whatever. But like, there's also like neuroscience and psychology and somatic attachment therapies and like energetics. Like there's things in science. And so that's my specialty that I've been studying for the last 10 years. And I blend it all together to help my clients reprogram their subconscious minds within, like, we call it the daily vitamins. So it's like 15 minutes a day that they take their daily vitamins and they can start to reprogram their relational patterns, which I'm obsessed with it. I love it so much. This is how I've changed my entire life. And it's just a treat because it, like I said, and like you've touched on, when it comes to trauma, we keep it in our quiet little corner, and we keep it to quiet little therapies that we hide, and we do the things where I love the way that I do it because it's community, it's celebration, like it's something where it's like we empower it and we turn, trauma into triumph. And I know that sounds fluffy, but it's like it really is this space where you get to meet some of your best friends, and the community is just the most extraordinary people, honestly, and they really are gonna change the world. Like I've said since I was 4 years old that I want to change the world, and then we got a little sidetracked for a bit, and now coming back to that, this is that movement for anyone that's looking to shift the generational trauma narrative.
I just want to say I'm always inspired by all these different stories I hear from guests. I feel very humbled because I get a lot of people with extraordinary stories doing things that they never thought they would do, and it all started with somewhere maybe not so pleasant, but they're giving it back to help, to hopefully maybe someone listening, someone hearing this, maybe someone who is struggling, maybe consider, because obviously I just want the dialogue to continue. Obviously I'm not but I want to just say, this quote from Unknown. I don't know. This Unknown has a lot of quotes. It says, the mind replays what the heart can't delete. That's basically what we've been speaking on. This month is a silent healing, you kind of said quiet, so it made me think of that. Just now you said that the theme of this month is silent healing. Why do you feel it's important to remember PTSD in your own, from your context? Why do you think it's important for us to remember this month?
I don't know if anyone's experience. I mean, I'm sure anyone that's listening to this knows someone or what have you. I have struggled with it. You kind of have shame around it, honestly, because it snaps you in ways until you do this healing. But when you don't even like realize, you kind of keep it hidden. I know family members, I know my best friends. And so the silent, it's like to remember that there's millions of people, you know, and the biggest thing, and I always talk about it's slaying that shame and like changing the stigmas around it, where it's like, it's okay. There's nothing that's broken with you. Like your brain is okay. Like it's just an initiation and an invitation to dive a little bit deeper. And so I feel it's important to talk about it, to neutralize it. Like it happens. Like it means you have a story and you get to go tell it. And it's those kind of things. And I think if we can shed more light on people that have experienced PTSD, that, you know, have come out the other side, that have tools to utilize, it destigmatizes it. And therefore, then we actually can come up with solutions instead of hiding it in the corner of white coats and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think when you individualize it, it also brings a human element to it. You know, we don't, diagnosis is there just to help with the treatment or solutions. It's not there to identify the individual themselves.
Exactly.
You know, when I think about PTSD, one person kind of shared it this way. You know, if you're in the forest, you see a bear, you respond, you run or freeze. That response, you know, there's a bear. It's understandable. But the problem is when this happens when you're at your kid's birthday, 5-year-old birthday. This happens when you walk down the street and something reminds you of something. That's when it becomes an issue. So, and not to say that it has, you know, I think if you're struggling and you're suspecting that you're struggling, get help. Ask for help. I'm not, you know, it's not diagnosing is just one part of it, and then it's not the whole part. The main part is you finding solutions to this. And I do want to ask you, I know it's kind of the same question, but how would you like PTSD Awareness Month to be remembered this year?
Destigmatized a bit. There's actually, as we were talking, I don't know if anyone watches Firefly Lane on Netflix, but there's a part where they bring PTSD forward because he went to war, and I'm not ruining anything for anyone, so don't you worry. But he goes to war and he has PTSD, but he's trying to fight it. And you can see how it's impacting his family, and you can see how it's impacting his kid. And it's not until that moment of true surrender that he's able to get the help that he needs. But it's okay if you fight it at first. Like, I just really want to say that it is okay. It's a human instinct because we don't like to be vulnerable and quote unquote weak. Like, it's okay. But look at the people around you and anyone that has been trying to help you. They're not trying to bully you. They're not, you know, pushing you in the wrong direction. They're being your mirror for what's actually happening that you might not even realize what you're doing. You know, that's our protectors. Your brain might actually be blocking you from even seeing that this is happening. So if your family is people you care about, if it's random people, if it's people you care about that are mirroring back to you that you're doing some type of behavior that is affecting them, that is affecting the way that you show up, that is affecting these things, it's okay to be scared. But there are so many outlets out there that can get you back to feeling normal. Like, you are not stuck this way. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is broken. Like, your subconscious is like plastic. Like, yes, if nothing happens, it's staying in a water bottle. But if you apply heat, you can make a plate out of it. Who knows? You can make an elephant. Like, you can do so many things if you apply heat. And the heat is the help that is available. So it really is just using the people around you as mirrors, not hindrances. Like, they are just trying to help you. And let that be your guide as opposed to the weapon you're trying to create it as.
Yeah, and I feel the hardest mirror to look at is our own self. Let's be honest, and it's gonna be hard. A lot of times, with I said before with context, cultural context. I mentioned me being half Korean, but also think about your parents. If you're struggling, think about your family. Think about their context. I try to do this, especially when things are very acute. They're feeling very, you know, vulnerable. That their parents, especially those people that they love close to them, they probably don't know how to help you. They're just trying the best they can. And if you think about generational, give them a little bit of grace. I'll tell you that much. They lived in a generation where it wasn't even talked about at all. So it's not that they're personally, they won't ever really understand what you're going through. Let's just talk about that. At the same time, it's okay. They want you to be good. They want you to be better. So they want to help you. So with that, it's like it's not building walls, it's building bridges, at the same time. Trying to find where you can some commonality. PTSD is not a life sentence. Doesn't mean it has to be there's ways to address it. So a lot of times when you watch those doomsday kind of movies, you kind of have this, like, you have everyone's huddled down. It's kind of something like that. When it comes to trauma, it's not like that way. You have options. You have people around you, whatever resources. That's why I said in the beginning, I don't reinvent the wheel. So if church is something that's traumatic to you, don't go to church. If it's something that, if it's a chest, whatever it is that helps you, someone that supports you, group that supports you, find what helps. I want to just throw it back at you as we wrap up. Laura, final thoughts, everything, healing to happy, all those links will be underneath in the notes so you guys can check it out. Anything else you wanted to share as we wrap up this talk on PTSD month?
Just really emphasizing that you're not broken. Nothing is wrong with you. Like, you've been through something. That's all that means. And your body is asking for you to get support in that. And is it going to suck? Probably for a little bit. Like, you got to feel it in order to heal it. That is literally the only way to heal PTSD. And, there is no external substance. There is no thing around it. There's not an easy button, unfortunately. And if you are craving, feeling normal again and feeling like you can be yourself and feeling like you can show up and feel love again and understand human connection and gestures and things of that nature, like, find a person you can trust. Like, therapy is like dating. Like, take your time on it for sure, but there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of resources. And that's like even how my podcast is. Like, all of it is all the different ways you can heal trauma, because there's so many different ways how yours is. It's like, just don't give up on it just because one thing didn't work. But I mean, you're your best asset. Go all in on that. Go all in. Yeah.
And to this, and you're also know that we can be our biggest critic. So give yourself don't base the urgency on some invisible clock. It'll take as long as it takes. When it comes to someone losing loved one in a funeral, it sounds awkward. It sounds wrong to say, "Oh, you'll get over it." It won't. You won't get over it. It takes the time it takes, and that'll be different for each one of you. So I just encourage you to find what resources. I'll put the links for healing to happy and anything else, Laura, that you want me to share. But thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insight, being part of the conversation. I love having new guests. I love hearing new, just inspiration to help. There's so many reasons for us to say, okay, I got better, I'm going to continue with my life. But instead, you're like, you know what? No, I'm going to go back and help someone else. So thank you so much for doing that. Stay updated with all things Revive Ministries through the various platforms, reviveministryfl.com. This is leaving you with this, saying goodbye, but leaving you with this last quote. It's from Dele Olanubi. Wounds won't heal the way you want them to. They heal the way they need to.